Hello, this is the Outlook web app and Exchange technical video. I'm Ann Vu, and I'm here with my colleagues Steve Chu and David Alexander. So David, what will we be discussing today?
Great, Ann. So today we're going to be talking about Outlook web app, which is the browser-based client for accessing Exchange 2010. So we've had Outlook web app for a number of versions of Exchange, but we've continued to make improvements through every release. And so today we're going to talk about the latest version of Outlook web app.
Great. So what are some of the specific items we'll be discussing?
Okay, so in this video, we are going to be talking about the value proposition as well as the feature set in Outlook web app, as we do with some of the other workloads. And then we're really going to dive straight into demos and demo 4 scenarios here. The first is the universal inbox demo, which will speak to a lot of the different functionality that you get within the Outlook web app client. Then we will look at platform flexibility, which shows Outlook web app working on the various major browsers. The third scenario will be calendar subscription, and then the fourth scenario will be about calendar publishing, and the two scenarios go hand in hand. And then finally, we will conclude and then talk about some resources if you're really interested in the topic.
So David, why don't you tell me a little bit more about Outlook web app?
So being able to access your Exchange account on Outlook web app in the browser really rounds out the Anywhere Access story in Exchange 2010, which is really about the fact that users can access their data on the PC, the phone, or the browser. So no matter what device they're using, they have access to rich features and functionality of Exchange 2010. So on the PC, that means that if they're using Outlook 2010 or Outlook 2011 on the Mac, they have access to all of its rich features and functionality there. If they're using their mobile device and connecting with Exchange Active Sync, they actually can access their data using a variety of devices on a variety of carriers, so that their companies are not locked into a specific carrier or a specific device. And then, of course, in the browser, in Outlook web app, which we're going to talk today, they have the ability to access their data actually on a variety of platforms.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about the value proposition of Outlook web app. And you can see we've framed it in 3 pillars. The first is the universal inbox, which we briefly mentioned earlier. The second is platform flexibility. And the third is external collaboration. Now, for the universal inbox, what is the universal inbox? Well, all that means is that everything you need for your email is right there in your Outlook web app client. And remember, the Outlook web app client is accessible anywhere you might be. And so really, that means that you have your email, voicemail, instant messages, personal archive, and much, much more anywhere you need it. And in addition to that, we have an experience within the inbox that you get through the web on Outlook web app that's similar to what you would get on the desktop with Outlook. And so users who have the entire Exchange story can really benefit from all of the different ways to access their information. Finally, there's instant messaging integration within Outlook web app. So you can easily change between different modalities of communication depending on what's most appropriate. If you find that somebody is online with their green present status and you want to just quickly ping them, you can send an instant message straight from your Outlook web app through the browser. And one final point is that a lot of the new features that we see with Outlook 2010 and Exchange 2010, you also get with Outlook web app, such as conversation view, where messages appear within context. Or ignore conversation, where you can set a server-side rule to prevent emails that you don't want to come into your inbox from doing so. Or mail tips, which are the early warning system to prevent sending an email by mistake. Or calendar sharing, where you can actually share your calendar both with individuals inside and outside your organization. So there's a lot of rich functionality in the 2010 version of Outlook web app. And for people who've never seen it, they'll be surprised because it is really a big upgrade from previous versions.
So what about platform flexibility? What can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so one of the big changes we made in 2010 was providing the premium version of Outlook web app not only on Internet Explorer, which was the limitation in previous versions of OA, but now you can get Outlook web app on Safari, Firefox, and Chrome, and you get all of the same rich functionality you would get in the Internet Explorer version on the other 3 versions, including all the features I mentioned before.
So what if end users want to collaborate with people outside of their organization, or even within their organization?
Yeah. So from a calendaring perspective, Exchange 2010's SP1 really rounds out the story of calendar sharing both inside and outside of the organization, both with users who are using Exchange, as well as people who are not using Exchange on another platform, or who might not even be on an email platform and simply want to access calendar data with a web browser.
That's great. Why don't we dive a little bit into the universal inbox story?
In this demonstration, we're going to cover a lot of the features that are new to Outlook Web App that will help users be more productive and access their information anywhere they may be. Bob Kelly is a compliance officer at Contoso, and you can see that he's logged into Outlook Web App, and the main reason is he's working at home. His Outlook client is on his work PC, but he can easily access all of the same information that he would on his Outlook client as he can do here on Internet Explorer.
Great.
So you see that Bob's inbox has a pile of messages lined up. And if he scrolls all the way down, there's the virtual list view to show all the messages within his inbox. That's a new feature of Outlook Web App in 2010. But there's a long list of messages here because right now it's arranged by date, which is how Outlook and Outlook Web App has always been sorted. But with 2010, Bob can actually go in here and change the view to conversation view. And you'll notice that when he does that, his inbox becomes much more manageable. Now, those other messages haven't disappeared. They're still there. The difference is that all the messages have now been aggregated according to the conversation thread that they were a part of. And this provides Bob with better context of his messages. And so if we take a look at this conversation here, review proposal for Tailspin Toys, and open it up, clicking on this triangle here, you'll see that all the messages are right there. On the left here, you'll see the reply trail. And that's really just an indicator of when messages were responding to previous messages. In some cases, the reply trail may have split off. So you'll notice that some of these messages will have different indicators, dots next to them, that indicate they were part of that particular reply trail. In addition, you'll see that these messages have dates next to them, and those are the ones that are located in the inbox. But there are also messages in this thread that are actually located in other folders. For example, you'll see a few here in the Sent Items folders, and then you'll see this one right here by Tomas is in the Tailspin Toys folder, which is located right here in Bob's mailbox. This is really useful because some users have trouble managing their inbox. They might decide to take an email and try to copy it into multiple folders, and then it gets confusing. So with Conversation View, they no longer have to worry about that. Even if a message is located in another folder, as long as it's part of the context of that conversation that they're seeing, it will appear there for them.
Great. Unified view.
Yes. So now let's say Bob wants to go ahead and forward this message from Tomas to his colleague Arnaud. So he's going to go ahead and click Arnaud's address. And you see as soon as he clicked Arnaud's address into the toolbar, he gets what looks like an early warning note from the server. And this is what we call mail tips, which really acts as an early warning system to help prevent users like Bob from making mistakes, sending messages to the wrong recipients, or having to wait for a message to bounce back. In this case, Arnaud seems to be out of the office for the next month. And so maybe Bob doesn't need to send this message to Arnaud. Maybe he should be sending it to Shane Kim, who Arnaud says should be getting messages while Arnaud is away. So in this case, Bob is going to go ahead and remove Arnaud. And you see that when he does that, the mail tip goes away. And he's going to type in Shane. And you see there that Shane Kim's address actually pops up in what we call the nickname cache. Anytime you've sent an email to an email address previously, it's now stored as a cached email address. And so then it will pop up as an easy way to populate the to field with that address anytime moving forward.
That's great.
And so it makes it really easy for him to add Shane's email address. He's going to go ahead and add Arnaud as well, just as a CC. And the mail tip popped up again, as it should. And there you go. So he sent that off. Now, we've looked at an example of a mail tip for an out-of-office reply, but mail tips can be used for many situations. They could be used, for example, if an attachment is too large, if there are external recipients in the distribution list, if a distribution list has a lot of recipients, and many, many more. In addition, IT administrators can create custom mail tips for recipients. And in this case, Bob remembered that the executive's distribution list was getting way too many extraneous emails, and he really wanted that list to be limited to only the most important escalations. So he asked his IT administrator to create a custom mail tip to appear anytime somebody emailed that distribution list.
Great.
And you can see here, I've pre-populated for the IT administrator the PowerShell script that would need to be populated into PowerShell. And you see here, set-distribution group-identity, executives-mail tip, and then the message is going to say this distribution group is used for urgent escalations only. So once the IT administrator has gone ahead and entered that in, Bob wants to test to make sure that it's showing up correctly. So he's just going to go ahead here and create a new message, and he's going to type in the executive's distribution group, and you can see here the mail tip's appearing now. This distribution group is used for urgent escalations only. So that's a custom mail tip. Bob, it's great. Bob sees it there, so he no longer has to worry. That's been done. So he's going to go ahead and close this. Okay, so now Bob's done with this thread for now. He now wants to go to a voicemail that he received from Todd Meadows, who is the legal counsel at Contoso. And you see here that a good example of the unified messaging card that appears in Outlook Web App. And it looks very similar to what you would get in Outlook 2010. You've got the inline player right here, where he can play the message directly from his inbox. He also has the voicemail preview here, which is a word-for-word transcription of what that voicemail says. And this is really helpful for Bob because he's in a lot of meetings, and oftentimes he gets phone calls that go straight to voicemail. Now in the meeting, instead of stepping out, he can actually read what the transcription of what that voicemail said and make a determination at that point on whether or not he needs to leave the meeting right then and there to take the call, or whether or not he can wait and call Todd back, depending on the urgency of the message. And so this is great because it helps Bob make those decisions without having to jeopardize the fact that he's leaving the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's move on. We are going to take a look now at this voicemail right here from Tomas Navarro. You can see it's a similar format as the one he saw from Todd. The big difference is this voicemail message is protected with information rights management. And that's great because now if Bob decides that he wants other people to get access to this message, the IRM protection will prevent the message from being forwarded or copied in an unauthorized way. And so this helps also to just give peace of mind, not only to the end users who use it, but also to IT administrators to make sure that there is a level of control with sensitive information related to email.
Okay.
And so now Bob's decided that maybe he wants to go ahead and file this away into his archive. Now in the past, there would be no archive available for Bob. But with Outlook Web App in 2010, he's got his archive right here available to him in the left side folder navigation as he normally would. And this is something that's new with 2010. In the past, he would have to use a PST file, which is only stored locally on his work PC. Now that he's got his archive located on the server, he's able to drop any message into that archive folder and be able to access it from his Outlook client at work, his Outlook client on a different machine, or on his Outlook Web App. So
and that's from anywhere.
And that's from anywhere. So he can go ahead and move this into there. And so now he's done that. One last thing that Bob needs to do before he's off for the night is to set up a call answering rule for his new administrative assistant, Elizabetta. And he can do that straight from his Outlook Web App. If he clicks on the options here and goes into the Exchange Control Panel, which is the back end of Outlook Web App, he's able to click here on the Phone tab, which provides him with a call answering rule wizard. Now, this wizard looks a lot like the email rule wizard, and it works in much the same way. He clicks New Rule, And if he says, if my schedule shows that my status is busy or away, he'll apply that. And then when he's busy or away, he wants the phone call to be transferred to Elisabetta. Okay, apply. And then he's going to name it to Elisabetta. And then just like that, the call answering rule is set up. Any calls he gets when he's busy or he's away will automatically be forwarded to Elisabetta. And then she can triage those messages for him.
So what if Bob needs to access Outlook web app from another computer and it's not using Internet Explorer?
It's a good question, Anne. So you noticed that he was using Internet Explorer, but the great thing about Outlook web app is you can now get the premium experience across the 4 major browsers, Safari, Firefox, and Chrome. And so if we take a look at the demo again, this time we are logged in as Elisabetta because she's new to the organization. She wants to make sure she's on top of Bob's schedule early on. And so she's going to go ahead and take a look at his calendar. Now you can see she's logged in now through Firefox. And you get the same premium experience with Outlook web app in Firefox as you do with Internet Explorer. You see here there's the calendar view, the reply trail. There's the option to ignore conversation. He's got IRM protection. So a lot of the features that we've talked about in the other demonstration are all available here as well. Now, Elisabetta is going to go ahead and take a look at Bob's calendar. And you see that right now she only has her own calendar in view. But if she clicks here under Bob Kelly, his calendar now appears side by side with hers. And this is because Bob has given her delegate access to his calendar. She can actually not only see what's on his calendar, but she can act on the appointments. And so she notices that there are 2 conflicting appointments here on the 7th. So what she wants to do is find out from Bob whether or not he wants to keep that conflicting appointment. So she goes back to Mail, and now with Outlook web app, you have instant messaging and presence integrated throughout the client. And she is actually available, and she can change her present status up here in the top right corner. But she's going to go ahead and stay available and come down here to her contact list. She notices Bob Kelly's there, so she's going to go ahead and send him an instant message. Do you want to keep Tailspin meeting on the 7th? So she's going to send that off. And you'll notice that Bob's received that instant message. So he's going to, through his communicator client, so he's going to go ahead and respond yes. And close that. And she's received the response right here from her Outlook web app. And so she can go into the calendar and simply accept this meeting on his behalf. And now Bob's has accepted that meeting, and he knows that he's accepted that meeting through Elisabetta's delegate access. So before closing for the night, Elisabetta has one other action item she needs to do. She was going to send Shane Kim an email asking him to verify the budget that they had talked about earlier in the day for a team social event. So she just wants to make sure he's still okay with that. She sees that he's online, and so she's going to go ahead and click, are you okay with budget? Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and move over here to Chrome, and you see...
And that's logged in as Shane.
Yeah, that's logged in as Shane Kim. He's logged in through Google Chrome. He received the instant message from her, so he's going to click yes, and then close this. And you see that his Outlook web app experience is just as rich as Bob had in Internet Explorer and as Elisabetta had in Firefox.
Looks the same.
Yep, looks exactly the same, all the same functionality. Elisabetta's received that response. She knows that she can go ahead and assume the budget's okay. And everyone logs off for the night. And they were able to do all this because they have a rich premium experience on Outlook web app across many platforms.
So thanks, that's great, Steve. Thanks for going over some of the end user productivity benefits that they get when they're on the go. So let's get David back in to talk about some of the calendar sharing functionality.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm really excited to talk to you about one of my favorite features in Exchange 2010 Service Pack 1, which is basically the new availability to publish calendars over the internet as well as subscribe to calendars that are published on the internet. So let's go ahead and take a look.
That's great. I'll leave it to you.
Thank you.
All right. So let's come right back to Bob Kelly's Outlook web app inbox. And here you'll see that Bob has been having a back and forth conversation with Kim Abercrombie. And they've been experiencing something that many people have experienced, which is a back and forth thread with someone who is outside of their company about when is a good time to meet. And so you can see here, hey, they just had a phone call. Bob says, hey, how about later today? Kim says, nope, I can't meet then. Bob says, how about another time? Kim's busy, etc. And so you can see that this has become quite a problem, and they need some sort of scheduling solution that will really help them make it easier for them.
Yeah.
So users within Exchange organizations have been able to see each other's availability, or what we call free busy, for a number of releases now. But getting that free busy information for users outside of their organization has always been a challenge, especially if those other users outside of the organization aren't actually using Exchange. So in Exchange 2010 Service Pack 1, Internet Calendar Publishing allows users to share and subscribe to calendar data that's published in the universal iCalendar format with truly anybody, whether they're inside or outside the organization, and then whether those recipients are using Exchange or another platform, or even just accessing it on a web browser.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and see how this feature helps simplify Bob and Kim Abercrombie's experience and keep them really focused on the proposal that they want to discuss in person, rather than just finding the time when they can meet. Kim works for Fourth Coffee, which is a 10-person business, and Kim, over here, is using Yahoo to maintain her work calendar. So Kim has published her calendar in this universal iCalendar format so that she can, as I just described, share her calendar with friends and family as well as other people that she's trying to collaborate with. Now, if we flip back to this conversation with Bob Kelly, we can see that in the latest email that she sent to Bob, she sent along a link, which Bob can now use to go ahead and make a subscription using Exchange 2010 Service Pack 1. So, if Bob copies that link, and then he goes over to his calendar, he comes up here to Share and Add Calendar. Here he has the option to choose to either add the calendar of a colleague that's in his organization, Contoso, or he can add a calendar from the internet, which he'll go ahead and select right here, and he'll paste in that file or that URL that Kim had just sent him. So he clicks OK. Once that is complete, Bob can now see a view of Kim's calendar side by side with his in his Outlook web app calendar. And so now it's much easier for Bob to just take a look at both his calendar on one side over here and Kim's calendar over here, which he's subscribed to, and see a time when they're free. In this case, it looks like on Friday the 8th, they both have a free time slot from 2 to 3. So Bob can come back here to the thread, he can hit reply, and tell her that he's found a successful time to meet. And he can send that off. And with that, Bob and Kim now have a time that they can meet when they're both free, and they've avoided what could have been another few rounds of that back and forth game. Can you meet now? No. Can you meet at this other's time? And so now they can really focus on the task at hand, which is working on the proposal for the new project.
So that's really handy. How does Kim see Bob's calendar now?
Great question. So we just saw how Bob can make a subscription to an internet-published calendar using Exchange 2010 SP1. And as I said before, Exchange 2010 SP1 does allow users to publish their calendars in a similar way, even to non-Exchange users. But in order to do that, Exchange does have to allow for anonymous, aka unauthenticated, access to its users' data.
So that's really good for a lot of customers. But unauthenticated or anonymous access to calendars probably doesn't work for a lot of Exchange organizations. So what do you do in that scenario?
Yep. So first and foremost, calendar publishing is actually off by default for Exchange 2010 SP1 organizations, because we know that this doesn't necessarily meet the needs of all the organizations.
Yeah.
But for those that do want to go ahead and turn it on, we have a number of security measures that are in place. First, the calendar folder from within which the data comes is actually a subfolder of the main OA virtual directory. And so this basically protects organizations from allowing external users to access their OA data, and it primarily restricts them to just their calendar data.
Okay.
for the organizations for whom this meets their requirements, they can then go ahead and turn on calendar publishing. So let's go ahead and take a look.
Okay.
We're coming right back to Bob Kelly's Outlook web app calendar, and we'll see when we go to that share button, the option to publish this calendar to internet is actually grayed out because, again, that option is unavailable to Bob because his organization, Contoso, has not yet turned it on, and it was off by default. So Tomas Navarro, the Contoso administrator, is going to go ahead and enable this feature for Bob. Let's take a look. So if we flip into Remote PowerShell, we're going to basically now act as Tomas Navarro and use some of the quick commandlets to create a sharing policy, apply that to Bob, and then we'll see that Bob is off and running. So Tomas has already used PowerShell to configure a couple of the first steps, which are configuring the web proxy URL for the mailbox server and enabling the publishing virtual directory for the client access server.
Okay.
Now he's going to go ahead and use the shell to create a sharing policy, like I said, that specifically allows for this internet calendar publishing. And he can now apply it to the desired users. In this case, just Bob.
Just Bob.
So first, he runs the get sharing policy commandlet to see what policies are in there. In this case, you see that there's only the default sharing policy for Contoso, which does allow the federated calendar sharing, but does not allow the internet calendar publishing.
Okay.
Now, Tomas will go ahead and create a sharing policy that allows both federated and internet calendar sharing. But when doing so, Tomas chooses only the most basic level of sharing possible. In this case, you see free, busy, simple right after the anonymous colon. So that only the most basic level of free, busy data and not any of the details such as title and location will be available for the users to publish.
Okay.
So he creates the sharing policy, and Tomas can now go ahead and apply that sharing policy to Bob Kelly. It's important to note here that in the process of doing this, Tomas could apply the policy to the entire organization, to specific subsets of the organization, or just individual users like Bob in this case. And again, I want to note that within the scope of whatever Tomas, the administrator, has allowed for the users, they can always choose to share their calendar with either less granularity than he's allowed or not at all. It's their choice.
Okay.
It's also worth calling out over here in the Exchange Management Console that in the Sharing Policies tab of Mailbox within Organization Configuration, first you see that there's that new sharing policy that we just created, but there's also a wizard that Tomas could have launched to create that new sharing policy. He would have given it a name, he would have specified the detail with which users can share their internet calendars, and he would have added the users, the groups of users, or the entire organization, again, based on whatever he chooses to allow. So, switching back to Bob, Bob refreshes his calendar, goes back to share, and you'll see that he now has published this calendar to internet enabled.
PowerShell magic.
PowerShell magic. So he clicks the option, and in the options window that comes up, you'll see that Bob has a drop-down for the level of detail at which he wishes to choose, to publish his calendar. However, choosing anything but availability only in this case will result in an error for Bob because Tomas has restricted that sharing just to that most basic level of free busy sharing, which I discussed earlier. Bob can then also choose the range of time with which he wants to share his calendar, all the way from 1 day before and after now, all the way to 1 year before or after now. Bob can also decide what type of access he wants to give when he publishes his calendar. He can either choose to give public access, which will create a sharing URL that actually can be discoverable over the internet. And it's relatively intuitive to sometimes guess what that sharing URL is.
Okay.
Or Bob can go ahead and choose restricted. And with calendar publishing turned on, this restricted option still has the ability to let Exchange provide a level of security for those wishing to privately share their calendar just with those that they want to provide the information to. And so in this case, choosing restricted will obfuscate the URL or format it in such a way that that URL can't be guessed. So it's a GUID, it's a whole random string of junk that no one can really guess. Bob chooses restricted here. He goes ahead and clicks Start Publishing. And with that, he's done.
You got the URLs.
You got the URLs. And when he goes back to share, you'll see now that he has a couple options. Instead of publishing, he can send links to his calendar or he can change his publishing settings. If he goes to change, that will let him either regenerate a new URL in case some people have gotten access to it that he didn't wish, or if he wishes to change the date range or the availability in case the administrator has changed those settings, or he can simply stop sharing his calendar, in which case those URLs will no longer work. In this case, Bob can also choose to send links to his calendar, which pops open an easy email form, which has all the information needed to view Bob's published calendar by any of those recipients that he sends this to. And so in this case, they can either view it in a web page with this URL that's right up here, or they can input this ICS address in a similar fashion that I showed earlier when Bob was subscribing to Kim's Yahoo calendar. So he goes ahead, adds Kim to it, presses send, and now he's basically invited Kim to view his published calendar. So if we flip back over to Kim's Yahoo inbox, you see that Bob has sent an email sharing the published calendar, and down here are those links that she can use to subscribe to his calendar using Yahoo's process. Once she's done that, if she refreshes her calendar, we see that Bob Kelly's information is now overlaid with her own, but only with the free busy information, which is that level of data access that he provided when he chose what level of detail he wanted to share. You see basically that not only does Bob have the ability to subscribe to internet published calendars that others are providing him access to, he can go ahead and do the same thing as long as his organization has decided to turn on the feature for him.
So that's really helpful for people who work with a lot of partners or external customers that they have to meet with frequently.
Definitely. You know, and we often take it for granted at larger business like Microsoft, where we often work with people inside the company. You know, it's very easy to share calendars and see people's availability. But this is great for smaller businesses that really often do work more with people outside their own company than inside.
So let's bring back Steve for the summary.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks for that demo, David. That was great. And now we're going to just talk about the big takeaways from this video for Outlook Web App. The first is that Outlook Web App is cross-browser compatible. Remember, you get the premium version of Outlook Web App on Internet Explorer, Firefox, Safari, and Chrome. The second point is that Outlook Web App now enables even more unified communication scenarios, especially the fact that instant messaging and presence are integrated throughout the client. And finally, Outlook Web App extends desktop productivity to the web. A lot of those great features that you get with Outlook 2010, like ignore conversation or mail tips, you also get with Outlook Web App in 2010.
So where do I go to learn more?
Sure. Well, for people who want to learn more after this video, we've put up a couple additional resources here. We have some information on what's new in Outlook Web App for those looking for a refresher. We also dive a little bit deeper in a couple of TechNet articles. We have the Microsoft Exchange team blog, and for those looking to get a little bit more granular on some of the calendaring stuff I talked about, there's a link at the bottom there.
Thanks, David. And thank you for watching. For more information, please go to some of the resources that David was talking about. And also, check out some of our other videos, including our Anywhere Access videos, as part of our Exchange Technical video series. Some of these videos include Anywhere Access on Outlook, as well as mobility. Thanks.